Hello and welcome to this Thursday edition of FreightWaves Now. I'm host Anthony Smith, and later on I'll be jumping in for a shipper Econ update. But first, we're going to go to Zach Strickland with the carrier update brought to you by PowerFleet. Stay tuned.
Hey everyone, and welcome to your Thursday carrier update presented by PowerFleet. I'm Zach Strickland, and Laura has made landfall, as we can see here on our critical events map in sonar. It came in through Lake Charles last night and is now currently making its way through Louisiana on its way into Arkansas and whatnot. So in front of the hurricane, we saw tender rejection rates fall, as a lot of carriers were trying to get out of the way, accepting a little bit more freight, but we also saw shipper volumes fall as well, and that's going to create a little bit of a buckle in the capacity environment here over the next few days, 2 weeks, if you will, as Laura continues to make its way. And again, we will find out further what kind of damage, etc., what kind of impact to capacity it'll be here in the coming weeks. But for now, it will continue to drive up through the Arklatex region, turning over into the Tennessee Valley here in a little while. So we've got, the market continues, the hurricane is hitting in an environment where we are consistently tight. Volumes are still on the rise, as we can see with our outbound tender volume index there in green. Tender rejection rates continue to be elevated, bumping over 25% yesterday for the first time in a long while. So it will be interesting to see this dynamic play out in terms of, if this is a significant damage event with the Hurricane Laura hitting, rural Louisiana into Arkansas, et cetera, and what that may do to capacity, especially in a market where we're talking about spot rates being over $3 a mile in many cases. So, again, there's going to be a certain amount of capacity that's going to be diverted to FEMA relief efforts and whatnot, but how much of it is going to happen in an environment such as this one? We haven't seen this kind of environment since 2005, 2006, where we had a lot of major hurricanes coming through. Katrina was one of those, for instance, and the spot market was relatively active as well. But for now, volumes, rejection rates on the rise. Weighted rejection index, just to give us a sense of where the most volatile area, with rejection rates are occurring with volumes. Ontario and Los Angeles continue to be one of the strongest areas of the entire United States in terms of tender rejection rates continuing to increase, combined with all that volume that's already been building over time over the last several months out of the Los Angeles area. Again, the port remains very active. A lot of import volumes still coming in. Intermodal volumes, if you've listened to Mike Bowden-Distel talk about it, intermodal volumes are over 5% over year over year right now, and a lot of that originates in that Los Angeles market and coming across the country. So, we've seen an increase in intermodal rates on the spot market, basically deterring people from using intermodal activity. So that's only going to put more pressure on the trucking market here over the coming weeks until that subsides. Atlanta, St. Louis, Salt Lake City, all showing up in dark blue there, meaning you definitely need to pay attention to that. Those areas for increased spot market activity and spot market rates. But you see that area around Louisiana, we still have some, orangish red colors sitting there in San Antonio, Memphis, Dallas, all showing declining spot or tender rejection rates, therefore a little bit more decline in spot market activity. They are showing up here in the negative on the weighted rejection index. Let's look at Houston a little bit more clearly, because Houston's the largest freight market in that area. And this is what I'm talking about right here. We're having a lot of inbound volumes surging into the Houston market right now, whereas outbound volumes there in the blue falling down. That's going to create a glut of capacity, if you will, over the next little bit. Depending on how much of that capacity is needed in the future, as these shippers probably taking a little bit of time off, getting out of the way of the hurricane, preparing for it. But that doesn't deter everybody from shipping into this market. So we're going to see a lot of trucks, a lot of freight flow coming into the Houston market with not as much coming out. Now, when these shippers turn back on, though, we could see, a little bit of a balance correction there, especially if we're talking about a few days of activity that need to be made up for on the shipper end. So Houston market, if you're looking for any kind of freight here in the next little bit, not a lot of activity today, but here over the next little bit, you're talking about local and long haul freight leading the way out of that market. So the best of both worlds, if you will. And that'll do it for today's carrier update.
The comprehensive logistics offerings from PowerFleet cover in-cab ELD, fleet management, trailer tracking, cargo monitoring, and tracking other assets such as chassis and intermodal containers. Power up your operations with PowerFleet.
Hello and welcome to the Shipper Econ Update. I'm the lead economist here, Anthony Smith, and today we have quite a few topics to cover. We're going to get started with the latest in durable goods. So behind me, I have the chart here for durable goods new orders, and what we can see is that there has been a very consistent increase on a month-over-month basis. We're seeing a consistent rise and a recovery trend when we're looking at the month-over-month basis, but this is something to really watch closely because it's easy to get caught into what's happening as we move on a month-to-month basis, but what's happening on a year-over-year basis is that we're still down over 10%, although we are seeing this recovery effort in full effect. So this is good news, but always keep this in mind with how we're moving in comparison to previous year ago levels. But good news nonetheless. But what's powering some of this recovery is really going to be the main thing, especially as it pertains to freight. When we're looking at overall durable goods, we're looking at a lot of consumables that are powering this ongoing trend of rise. And so when we're breaking this down, we look within it, we're seeing an influx of increase for motor vehicles and parts and trucks. Both of those increased over 20% on a month-over-month basis and have been rising on a consistent basis, so consecutive months. Again, when you're looking at a year-over-year basis, even when we're looking at motor production or automotive production and parts production, this is still down over 20% year over year. So keep it in mind and keep it in a tight framework of not just getting caught into what's happening on a month-to-month basis, but what's also happening on a year-over-year basis. But one of the other aspects we're going to look into is what's happening on the manufacturing side, so more on the corporate side of things. And so right here I have in the purple line, non-defense capital goods new orders excluding aircraft, which is something we like to watch closely here because it's a good indication of business-to-business activity. In the orange line here we have flatbed outbound tender rejection index. And so when we look at the two, usually flatbed trailer types are what's going to be hauling these goods. And so we can see that there has been a consistent rise in non-defense capital goods new orders, so some increase in business-to-business activity. Again, this falls below year-ago levels, but we are seeing a consistent rise month over month. So we're moving in the right direction. The other aspect that I'm going to touch on real quick here is going to be pertaining to the housing market. Andrew Cox and myself talked about this briefly on the last Shipper Update, but we're going to look at what's happening with permits. And so permits are a preceding factor of what's going to happen with actual starts. And we're looking at permits, they are at well above what we expected for that trend. So we're seeing that housing permits are essentially above year-ago levels, and we're seeing a sustained rise in recovery here. The other aspect to remember when we're looking at housing starts and home transactions is that housing starts, new home construction is a much smaller part of overall transactions. We're looking at bigger parts of it is going to be existing home sales, and the inventory is very tight there, and that's increasing median prices. But keeping things very topical, what's going on right now, especially with hurricane situations, what's going to happen after the hurricane is going to be a lot of recovery efforts, and there's also going to be a lot of lumber and building products needed to be shipped to the area. This is something that we're seeing commonly in past hurricanes, and this is going to be nothing different. And so as we're looking at what's going to happen I think Zach Strickland did a great job at the carrier update with explaining what's going to happen with that. But post, there's going to be a lot of effort, and that's probably going to keep lumber prices elevated for a bit longer. For a little bit more updates on what's going to happen with the hurricane, also be sure to check into the midday market update happening here at noon. But that's going to do for this for the Shipper Econ update. Thanks so much for tuning in. You can always catch more of our content on FreightWaves TV on our FreightWaves TV app and all your favorite streaming platforms, including Apple TV. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.